Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something a little different.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a fictional story, actually, called Bona Vacantia.
Okay.
But what makes this one really interesting is that the author later revealed that it's an allegory for real-world events, especially global politics, during the pandemic.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're going to try to unpack some of the hidden meanings here.
Absolutely. I think it's fascinating how the author chose to use such an everyday setting, like a high-end restaurant, to reflect these complex global issues.
Yeah.
It's a clever way to make us look at things from a new perspective, I think.
Yeah. It's like they're saying even a fancy dinner party can be a stage for these power struggles and global tensions that are going on.
Exactly.
Well, let's set the scene. Okay. We're in Bona Vacantia, this super exclusive restaurant where everyone's focused on status and appearances and who's sitting where. But even the name itself, Bona Vacantia, hints at something a little deeper, don't you think?
Definitely. It means ownerless property, which kind of suggests that all the things that people value in this restaurant, power, wealth, even their place at the table, could be precarious. And I think that sets the stage for the whole allegory.
All right, so let's meet some of the characters here.
Okay.
We've got Bob, a retired Navy commander turned author, and he represents England.
Okay.
And then there's his business partner, Ridley, who represents Scotland.
Gotcha.
And their relationship is interesting.
Yeah.
Because it kind of mirrors that whole England-Scotland dynamic.
Absolutely. And especially with Brexit looming large in the background.
Exactly.
And, this is reflected in the story. Bob leaves this group that represents the European Union.
Oh.
It's like watching a real-world tension play out right there in the restaurant.
Yeah, like the author's saying, hey, look, even in this fancy setting, we can't escape these political realities.
Exactly.
And speaking of politics, we can't forget Winfred, the brash politician who embodies China.
Yes.
And then there's Pei, a successful computer programmer who represents Taiwan.
I see.
And it's pretty clear that Winfred is constantly trying to control Pei, just like we see playing out in the real world between China and Taiwan.
And it's not just their actions. It's the author uses little details to make the allegory even richer.
Okay.
Like Winfred's journey from humble beginnings to a position of power mirrors China's economic rise. But his questionable tactics and his disregard for others kind of hints at the downsides of that rise.
Interesting.
It's like the author's making us think about the cost of unchecked ambition.
Yeah, and then there's this mess that Winfred keeps leaving behind. These brown stains that no one really wants to acknowledge.
Right.
It's a pretty bold way to represent the spread of the COVID-19 virus.
Absolutely. It's a very visceral metaphor that really gets the point across.
Yeah, and what makes it even more interesting is Teddy, the maitre d' who represents the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
Just like we saw in the early days of the pandemic, Teddy tries to downplay the situation.
Right.
Pretend it's not as bad as it seems.
Exactly.
It makes you think about, how those in power respond to crises. Do they prioritize transparency and action, or do they try to sweep things under the rug?
It's a good question.
But let's move on to another key player.
Okay.
Roscoe, the stereotypical mob boss who embodies Russia.
All right.
And, of course, we can't forget his date, Yuki, who represents Ukraine.
Yeah.
This relationship, I think, is fascinating because the story was written before the Russia-Ukraine war.
Wow.
But it foreshadows that conflict so accurately.
Really?
The way Roscoe treats Yuki, the aggression, the power imbalance. It's a little chilling looking back on it now.
Yeah, the author's ability to capture those global tensions before they fully unfolded is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder how much of what we see in fiction is actually reflecting the world around us, maybe even predicting things to come.
That's true.
I mean, the author managed to layer all of this into what seems like a simple dinner party gone wrong.
That's the beauty of allegory.
Yeah.
It can be both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Right.
And it can make us think about complex issues in a new way.
So speaking of thought-provoking, let's talk about that Maison Rouge Nectar de Guy wine.
Okay.
At first, everyone's eager to try it, but then they become hesitant.
Oh.
This is no ordinary wine.
Okay.
It actually represents the mRNA vaccines.
Wow.
The author's playing with language here, too.
Yeah.
Maison Rouge translates to red house, possibly hinting at the virus's origins in China.
Interesting.
And nectar de ghee means nectar of the needle, directly referencing how the vaccine is administered.
I see.
But the brilliance is how it reflects the real world.
Yeah.
Just like people were initially excited about the vaccines, and then misinformation and fear led to hesitancy. The diners in Bona Vacantia go through that same emotional roller coaster with this wine.
It's like the author is holding up a mirror to society and asking us to examine our own reactions to these advancements.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if other authors are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Weaving these hidden messages into their stories.
It's possible.
But before we get too caught up in that, let's shift gears a little bit and explore another intriguing element of the story.
Right.
Hank's equity seals.
Okay.
What is the deal with these little slips of paper that he uses to pay for everything?
Well, this is where the author delves into the world of economics.
Okay.
Those equity seals are actually a clever analogy for fiat currency, specifically the fractional reserve banking system that underpins our modern economy.
So for those who might not be familiar with fractional reserve banking.
Yeah. So imagine this. You deposit $100 in a bank. The bank doesn't just keep all $100 locked away.
Right.
Instead, it lends out a portion of your deposit, maybe $90 to someone else.
Okay.
That borrower then uses that money, and it might end up in another bank, which in turn lends out a portion of that, and so on.
So the same money is being multiplied and circulated throughout the system.
Precisely. It's like a magic trick, where the same $100 is seemingly in multiple places at once.
Okay.
And that's what Hank is doing with his equity seals.
Gotcha.
He's created a system where these slips of paper represent value, even though they're not backed by any physical commodity.
Okay.
Just like our money.
Yeah.
Their value is based on trust and the collective belief that they have worth.
So the author is suggesting that our entire financial system is built on a kind of shared faith.
It is.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is, and it raises some important questions.
Like what?
Like, what happens when that trust erodes?
Yeah.
What happens if people start to doubt the system? And that's what the author seems to be exploring through Hank and his equity seals. And trust me, it gets even more interesting as the story unfolds.
Well, then let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and find out what happens. Okay, so we're back, and we're still trying to unravel all these layers of meaning in Bona Vacantia.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were talking about Hank and his equity seals.
Right.
Which, as we learned, function a lot like our modern monetary system.
Yeah. What I think is so intriguing about the equity seal system is how it mirrors not just the concept of fiat currency, but also the potential for exploitation.
Okay.
Remember how Hank's employees figure out they can just duplicate the seal?
Yeah, like they're printing their own money, right?
Essentially. And this act of duplicating the seals, even though it's illegal in the story's world, I think reflects real-world practices like quantitative easing or even subprime lending. In essence, it's creating money that's not backed by tangible assets.
So the author is drawing a parallel between these small-time employees making copies and the practices of powerful financial institutions.
Exactly.
That's pretty thought-provoking.
It is. It makes you wonder how stable is any system where value is based on perception and trust.
Yeah.
Especially when those in power, like Hank, benefit from maintaining that perception.
And what about the other diners? Do they just accept these equity seals? Without question.
Well, initially there's a sense of curiosity, even admiration for Hank's system.
Yeah.
He presents it as this convenient, innovative solution.
Right.
But as the story progresses and that mess,
brown stains.
Yeah, the brown stains start spreading, a sense of unease starts to grow among the diners.
Yeah, it's like that mess, which we know symbolizes the consequences of unchecked power.
Right.
And the potential for these systems to break down becomes impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
It's like the elephant in the room that's leaving brown footprints all over the fancy white marble floor.
Exactly. And just like with the spread of a virus, the diner's first reaction is to downplay it.
Right.
Pretend everything is fine. They're more concerned with appearances than with addressing the root cause.
So do they ever confront Winfred about the mess? Or do they just keep sipping their fancy wine and pretend nothing's wrong?
Well, this is where the author's commentary on human nature, I think it's really interesting.
Okay.
Instead of confronting the source of the problem, they turn on each other.
They blame each other for Winfred's mess.
Not directly, but their behavior, I think, becomes increasingly erratic and self-serving.
Yeah.
Roscoe, for example, lashes out at Yuki, mirroring how tensions can escalate into conflict when things start to unravel.
Right.
And Winfred, well, he tries to shift the blame and exploit the situation to his advantage. It's like the whole restaurant is descending into chaos with no one really in control.
It's a pretty bleak outlook, isn't it?
It does raise some unsettling questions about how we react both individually and as a society when things go wrong.
Right.
But remember, Romain, the chef, he makes a different choice. He walks away from the chaos.
So there's hope. Not everyone gets caught up in the mess.
Exactly. Romain represents individual agency, the ability to step back, assess the situation, and make a conscious choice, even when everyone else is caught in the current.
So he's like the voice of reason.
I think so, yeah.
The one who sees the bigger picture.
Yeah, and his departure is a rejection of the superficiality and the corruption that have taken over Bona Vacantia.
But what about those equity seals that he takes with him? Isn't that a little hypocritical?
It's more nuanced than that. Remember, the equity seals only have value within the system that supports them.
Right.
By taking them with him. I don't think Romain is seeking personal gain.
Okay.
It's more about highlighting the absurdity of the system itself.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
The author isn't just commenting on the pandemic or global politics.
Right.
This is a critique of power wealth and the systems we create, even the ones we think are stable.
Precisely. And by setting it all in this familiar environment, a restaurant, the author makes these complex ideas relatable and accessible. It's social commentary disguised as a dinner party gone wrong.
So what's the final takeaway here? What's the author's message as we close the book on Bona Vacantia?
Well, that's the beauty of this story. It leaves us with more questions than answers.
Okay.
Is it a warning about the fragility of trust? A satire on how we behave in a crisis? Or maybe a call to action urging us to recognize our own roles in these systems?
I don't know about you, but this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. I'm seeing those equity seals everywhere now.
Maybe that's the point. The author wants us to look beyond the surface.
Yeah.
To question the narratives we're told.
Right.
And to consider the deeper meanings hidden within the stories we encounter every day.
Well said. And on that note, let's dive into the final act of Bona Vacantia. We'll see what becomes of Winfred Pay and the rest of the diners in this allegorical feast. Welcome back to our deep dive into Bona Vacantia. We've explored all the symbolism, the characters, and the author's commentary on everything from global politics to the systems that kind of underpin our world.
Yeah.
But now the restaurant's pretty much emptied out, leaving only Winfred and Pay.
Right.
And to be honest, this doesn't feel like it's going to end well.
What I think is so striking about this final scene is the stark contrast to the bustling atmosphere that we saw earlier.
Right.
You know, the empty restaurant becomes this isolated stage where that power dynamic between Winfred and Pay becomes even more pronounced.
It is unsettling, isn't it?
It is.
The way Winfred approaches Pay, now that they're alone, the author, I think, doesn't shy away from portraying his true nature here.
No.
Opportunistic, self-serving, and completely disregarding Pay's autonomy.
It's a powerful reminder of what we talked about earlier, the dangers of unchecked power.
Yeah.
Winfred, just like the systems he embodies, seems to operate with this sense of impunity above the rules or consequences.
But remember, Romain the chef walked out?
Yeah.
He chose not to be a part of this anymore.
Right, and that's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Romain's departure serves as a counterpoint to Winfred's behavior.
Right.
It highlights the importance of individual choice, of dissent, even within a system that seems totally rigged.
And by walking away, he also leaves behind those equity seals, those symbols of a system built on illusion and manipulation.
Exactly.
It's like he's making a statement, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. His actions speak volumes.
Yeah.
He's rejecting not just the immediate mess, but the entire framework that enabled it.
Right.
It's a powerful message about individual responsibility and having the courage to break free from these corrupt systems.
So as we reach the end of Bona Vacantia, what is the overarching message here? Is this a tale of despair, a warning, or something else entirely?
I think it's a story that defies easy categorization.
Okay.
It's a multifaceted exploration of human nature, power dynamics, and the choices we make when we're faced with uncertainty and crisis. It's a call to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives we're told, and to recognize our own roles in perpetuating systems that might not serve us.
It certainly made me rethink those dinner parties I attend.
Yeah.
You never know what allegorical layers might be hidden beneath the surface.
Indeed. And that might be the author's ultimate goal.
What do you mean?
To awaken our critical thinking, to encourage us to question the world around us, and to recognize that we each have the power to make a difference.
Right.
Even if it's simply choosing to walk away from the Bona Vacantia in our own lives.
Wow. That's a powerful thought to end on. So the next time you sit down for a meal or even scroll through your newsfeed, just remember Bona Vacantia. Ask yourself, who are the players? What are the hidden meanings?
Right.
And most importantly, what choices will you make?
Yeah.
Because the world is full of stories waiting to be deciphered.
It is.
It's up to us to become more discerning diners, to see those equity seals for what they are. And to choose our own paths in the face of whatever mess life throws our way.